Consider your finances as first and foremost. Consider the type of loan you want. If you're somebody who's not really up on the financial market, you don't want into these fancy adjustable rates, the ARMs where it's an interest or fixed rate for so many years, and then what happens is they call it balloons, where the whole payment comes due.
Tell us what an ARM stands for.
Adjustable rate mortgage.
Adjustable rate mortgage,
yes.
Okay.
And if it's an adjustable rate mortgage, that means your interest goes up and down, so you're not on a specific payment each month. Depending upon what the current interest rates are, your mortgage will fluctuate up and down. So you may want a fixed rate of 15 or a 30-year fix. So I always tell them, be familiar with what you want and be comfortable. The second thing I tell them is that you need to know, based upon the percentage of your down payment, whether you're going to have an FHA loan or you're going to have a non-FHA loan. And the reason is if you have an FHA, that's where you put up 3% down payment up to 20%. Because if you have more than 20%, or excuse me, if you have 20% equity or more in your house, then you don't pay what's called PMI, which is mortgage insurance.
Okay, so two things. Tell us what FHA stands for and what PMI stands for.
Federal Housing Act.
Okay.
Or Federal Home Act mortgages. And PMI is primary mortgage insurance, which means that in the event you can't pay your mortgage for some reason, you have the insurance to cover the mortgage payment.
Okay.
And you'd have to pay those if your equity is less than 20%. And so you'll have an additional payment because normally your standard mortgage consists of principal and interest, your taxes based on a pro rata per month for a year, homeowner's insurance, which will run you probably around $700 a year, and then they divide that by 12, so let's say $70 a month. And then again, if you have less than 20%, you're going to pay PMI, which is tacked on to your monthly payment, which will disappear or drop off your payment once your equity reaches 20%.
Once it reaches that threshold. There are some places where if you buy in a condominium complex or in particular housing developments,
Correct.
that there are rules that you have to abide by. So you might not be able to put, say, Christmas decorations out front or plant certain kinds of foliage or put a commercial vehicle in the driveway. Lots and lots of restrictions. If you're a buyer, do you get to know those before you purchase?
Usually, yes, you do. It can happen one of two ways. One, your realtor will tell you you're buying into what they call a homeowners association and that you pay monthly what they call maintenance dues, and that covers insurance, that covers landscaping, snow removal, different things associated with that association. And they will tell you one of the things you might want to do is look at the bylaws or the master deed. And those can be obtained through a standard title search if the seller does not have them handy, because when your title company goes and searches the records relating to the property, normally associations file what was called a master deed and a copy of the bylaws, and they're available, and you'd be surprised at some of the restrictions. I live in a homeowners association, and children are not allowed to have swing sets in their backyard, and you're not allowed to have fences barricading your property from your neighbors.
You had talked about the buyer and seller negotiating to come to agreement of what's left, who's going to take care of maybe some issues that an inspection reveals. Can you negotiate with your homeowners association and say, well, I really like swings, so I want to buy this, but you have to let me have swing set here?
No.
It's set?
It's not set, but it's very, very, very difficult, and I would probably tend to say 98% are unsuccessful, because when the homeowners association is set up, there's a certain element they want in that neighborhood, a certain look. And obviously, if somebody has a swing set and somebody else doesn't, and they let it become dilapidated, especially some of those wooden ones, and fall apart, that detracts from the beauty of the neighborhood. So what they're trying to do is have everybody be standard, not have neighbors outdo each other, or not have your property fall in a state of being an eyesore compared to your neighbors.
Just so everybody knows, homeowner associations can't formulate contracts and bylaws that would exclude certain classes of people. Is that right?
For the most part, yes. They are allowed to do what they call adult living communities, where you're required to be 55 or 62 or older, but it must specifically state adult community, and that means that you can't have children living in those type of communities.
But we can't have any kind of a contract be honored that states someone because of their race, ethnicity, heritage, and all of those others. It violates federal housing laws, is that right?
That's correct.
When we talk about going through all of this process of meeting with a realtor, figuring out my budget, talking with a lawyer, it seems like it's a lot of work to buy a house. Do you think that it's worth cutting the corners and just going out there and doing it? Or do you think that put the time in now, because experience shows if you don't do it now, what's it, an ounce of prevention and
Worth a pound of protection.
Yeah.
I would tend to say you're better off putting the money up front, doing your due diligence searches with respect to a house. Otherwise, you could end up with the house like in the Money Pit, if you recall the movie.
Yeah, just...
And those can happen.
Recall the movie, I've lived it.
That's definitely something that can happen, and you need to make sure you know the house well enough, because as I said at the beginning, this is probably the single biggest purchase most people today make. And if you're going to spend that kind of money, you want to make sure you're getting the value that you're putting into the house and not having unforeseen issues. I mean, everything can come up. There can be, you know, casualties here or there, or something that you just didn't anticipate. But if you do your due diligence 9 out of 10 times, you're going to see what those issues are, because they are pretty foreseeable.
Most of them are, I would agree. And since you mentioned the Money Pit, it's important for people to know that even if you have done all of your due diligence and you have an inspection, sometimes houses bring surprises, right?
Absolutely.
So that if you think that there's one little thing that you want to do, you want to knock this wall out and make a bigger room, and you didn't realize it was a load-bearing wall, or you didn't realize there are pipes in there that are going to have to be rerouted, or fill in the blank. There's so many different things.
Correct.
You always have the unexpected that can come up.
And, you know, Dan, my first house, the kitchen, the one wall just wasn't conducive to what I wanted.
Right.
And we knew we had to knock down that wall. And the family had put halfway up the wall ceramic tile, and the rest was painted. And we said, okay, well, we're going to put cabinets there, but we need to take it down, make sure that there's enough studs in there that will hold the cabinets. And when we went to do it, believe it or not, they had taken the ceramic tiles. It was all around the kitchen, mind you. And when we broke that one wall, it was just like a dominoes. All the walls went. And so there we were, the whole kitchen, instead of just the one wall we wanted to tear down. When it got to the corner, they didn't take and basically caulk the tiles, they cemented them, and it just a ripple effect the whole way down. And you just heard this loud crash, and they all came down, and it was quite amusing. And that was something unexpected. We hadn't intended on sheetrocking every wall in the kitchen, only one. But
now you got a nice new kitchen, right?
Well, that was the benefit of it, I guess. But when you're a first-time home buyer, as it was for me, that was a little extra expense, you know, a couple $1,000s more than we had anticipated. And then what happens is, this is where you get into knowing what your budget is, because can you afford to do that? Or were you going to do this and this? Now something is going to have to be put on hold. Don't try to do it all at once.
That's important advice, right? People may buy a house and they'll think, I'm going to do everything at once, and it just becomes overwhelming.
It becomes overwhelming. That's when you start using the credit cards. That's when you start, you know, falling behind on payments on your mortgage or too much credit card debt. And that's why I say in buying today's market, you need to know what your limitations are. That's probably the single most important thing before you step out to go look at a house is, what can I afford? What type of house do I want? One I'm going to put money into by fixing it up, or one that's relatively new that just needs some cosmetic things, maybe new carpet, maybe a fresh coat of paint.
We talked about first-time home buyers. If this is a first house, do you get special tax credit?
There's some tax credits out there for first-time home buyers. There's an $8,000 tax credit that goes through the end of this year, or it might be even December 1st. I always suggest you check with your accountant to see if you qualify, because there's certain income levels, if you're single or if you're married, that if you exceed those levels, you don't get the $8,000 tax credit. So that's available out there, but check with your accountant just to make sure that you meet those qualifications. And it's also interesting to note that on that particular tax credit, first-time home buyer is either somebody who's buying their first home or who hasn't owned a home that they've resided in for the past 3 years.
I see. Susan Carlson of the law firm of Gruber, Colabella, Liuzza, and Williams, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Law Talk Today. I'm Dan Agatino, your host.